Open our hearts, O God, to the dawning light of your words of love and salvation, so that the words of my mouth and the meditation of each of our hearts may be acceptable to you this day. Amen. You must get along with one another, Paul exhorted the Corinthians, according to Eugene Peterson's The Message that Laura just shared with us. The New Revised Standard Version of the Bible translates Paul's words as be knit together in the same mind and the same purpose. In our deeply divided society, those sound like almost impossible demands, don't they? Even in the church, it's hard to find people knit together in the same mind. This was brought home to me recently when a couple of people voiced concerns about a feeling of ennui that seemed to have settled over the congregation. This wasn't a reason to panic, they say, but they mention how much they miss the buzz that usually fills this building on a Sunday morning, the buzz that we heard just a little bit ago, as people engage one another and convivially during fellowship hour or make plans for upcoming programs and activities. Now, some are sensing a low level of energy and restlessness and worry about what that might portend for the future of our church. I appreciate their concern. But just this week, I had 2 different conversations with newer members who nearly gushed as they spoke of how much they love being a part of this church, where they see such a vibrant community, so committed to making a difference in the world. They both commented on how much they love the concern our members have for one another and appreciate the myriad opportunities to serve and learn. I smiled as I thought about these 2 very different conversations, as I thought about Paul's letter to the church at Corinth. Cultivate a life in common, he urges. We may have a common life here, my friends, but the view of that life seems to vary from person to person. And therein lies a problem, it seems to me. Following more than 2.5 years of trauma brought on by a pandemic that seemed to come out of nowhere and overwhelm us in ways that we as comfortable, educated, and well-resourced 21st century Americans could not really comprehend. And we're still reeling and unsure of how to regain our footing. Even though things have improved since the early days when we lived in terror of this baffling killer, the effects of those long, lonely months still linger and influence our lives in ways about which we are not often even conscious. The effects of this period on the church are, it seems, even greater than in the rest of society for 2 reasons. First, the church is built on relationships, and suddenly, in March of 2020, we had to completely recreate ways to maintain those connections. Second, the institution had been in a state of flux for several decades, as the late church historian Phyllis Tickle has pointed out so clearly. In her excellent book, The Great Emergence, Tickle speaks of the great rummage sale that Christianity seems to go through every 500 years, during which it cleans house, getting rid of outdated doctrines and traditions to make space for new ideas. The pandemic has only accelerated these changes that were already well underway. These last 2.5 years have wrought countless changes on our lives, on our society, and on our church. So how are we to find a way forward? Paul's compassionate letter to the Corinthians offers some guidance. At the heart of his message is that community needs to be a higher priority than we might think. As I talked about with the children a few moments ago, we are stronger together and are meant to be in relationship both with God and with one another. We can draw great wisdom from an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, then go together. We need, my friends, to reconnect. Is Paul saying then that we need to surrender our truth and our sense of individuality and self to achieve this common mind? No, I don't think that's his message at all. Rather, he's saying that we must treat one another with respect, not tearing one another down or pointing fingers at decisions that fail. We need to listen as well as to speak. And here, Paul would caution that we need to get out of our echo chambers where the only voices that we hear are those with whom we agree. Instead, he tells us we must listen carefully to people whose opinions differ from ours. Paul knew that the Corinthian church was diverse, and he celebrated that diversity. We too need to cherish, celebrate, and respect our differences. Given Paul's teaching, it seems that the most important thing we need at this time is to rebuild those bonds, to reconnect. Recalling the bonds and sense of shared purpose that grew from the Jeremiah Project 5 years ago, perhaps another opportunity to gather in small groups to listen, dream, and share together would be important. And so, following the format of our last effort, the Noah Project was born. This curriculum is a 6-week session and opportunities to gather, to get to know one another better, to pray and reflect on topics that challenge us as we think more deeply about our common life. What does it mean to be church in this time and place? How are we connected to one another? How do we worship God in this place after the pandemic has wrought so many changes? How do we live out our life in mission and seeking justice? What is God's vision of what our church may become? And how do we evolve to meet the challenges of this time? It is our hope that these conversations will be deep, reflective, challenging, and will reveal to us a way forward as the church evolves, shaped both by the pandemic and Phyllis Tickle's Great Rummage Sale. As a number of people reviewed the Noah Project curriculum, some raised questions about the expected outcomes and how this would help us in addressing challenges like attracting new members to the congregation. These kinds of questions are ones seeking technical solutions rather than adaptive change. Ron Heifetz, a Harvard-based, world-renowned authority on leadership and a teacher and practitioner of that, points out that while oftentimes we need technical solutions, such as when the roof is leaking to get it repaired immediately, many problems demand adaptive change that takes time to determine. Too often, in a rush to solve a problem, we seek a technical solution when adaptive change is what is really needed. This kind of change refers to actions made to address more nebulous challenges that can take some time to fully implement and requires a process of thoughtful strategy, ongoing learning, and collective support. The Noah Project is not seeking technical solutions. There are no easy answers or recipes to follow to return to normal, because what was normal no longer exists. Our challenge now is also our great opportunity to rely on our faith, to listen closely for God's guidance, and know that we are stronger together, discerning what we may do to create a vibrant and healthy future for our congregation. The best way to enter into this process is prayerfully. And so we have created a 15-day meditation guide that will be emailed to you this afternoon. If you prefer a hard copy, the ushers have a limited supply for you in the back of the sanctuary, and you can pick one up from them as you leave this morning. I think many of you received one as you came in, and I would ask that if you would prefer to do this online, that you return the guide and allow someone who doesn't work online to use it. But feel free, we'll print more as needed. As you are able, please spend a few moments each day centering yourself and reflecting on the prompts provided. By taking this time to listen for God before our sessions begin, we believe our conversations will be more deeply faithful and guided by the divine rather than simply our attempts to find quick solutions. There are 8 small groups in which you may choose to participate, meeting either at church or on Zoom, on Sunday through Thursday, and in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Sign-up sheets are available on the table in the parlor, and a link to the sign-up genius will be available after worship, and a link can be found in your chat for those of you who are on Zoom and would choose to sign up this morning. The link will also be in your Good News on Thursday. Your groups will meet for 6 sessions during an 8-week window before we will gather for a vision summit in mid-November to pull together all of the input from the small groups. We will let all that information then steep throughout the holiday season and then form a team of church leaders who will gather to discern the information collected and determine how we might shape our future to better meet the needs of our current members, those who we hope to attract, and the needs of our community. Facing change is hard for most people, and so this process may be feeling overwhelming to some. Living in community, however, is not always easy, my friends, but the gifts of being united, not by blood, but as a family of choice who share a deep faith in Jesus Christ, is that the bond is strong, and it's the kind of relationship to which we have been called. The words of Isaiah ground us in a sense of hope. Just as this has been a challenging time in our lives, so too the people to whom the prophet was writing knew a dark and difficult period. Assyria had already overwhelmed the northern kingdom of Israel, and Judah was soon to be threatened by the Babylonians, who exiled the people, laid siege to Jerusalem, and then conquered and destroyed the Temple of Solomon. Into this darkness, the prophet spoke words of hope, saying, "The people who have walked in darkness have seen a great light. For those who live in a land of deep shadows, light and sunburst comes through. You repopulated the nation. You expanded its joy." My prayer is that we will all commit to trust God, who always shines a light of hope, even into the darkest of times, and that we will know God to be our guide through this time. By choosing to be part of the community, all in this together, there is no doubt that our future will burst with light and expand with joy. May it be so. Amen.